What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from Pink Tourmaline. And today we're going to be covering a very special NDE that I think showcases a lot of the manipulation, the prime manipulation that is discussed that occurs in NDEs. This is a great example of a lot of these type of manipulations that people have pointed out. And again, I want to start by saying, first of all, this NDE that we're reviewing from Betty Guadagno, I believe is the correct pronunciation. I'm by no means saying that she is insincere, inauthentic. No, I'm not saying any of that. Of course, I actually believe wholeheartedly her account and what she remembers and what she recollects. And I believe that when she's conveying it, this is her truth. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to apply a logical lens from a bird's eye view to what she is conveying and what she's relaying, and picking that apart and using my logical mind to determine, hey, is this legitimate, or does this seem to be some sort of a grand manipulation to keep her ensnared within the system, and also to bring back messages maybe for the rest of us, to keep the rest of us in this same sort of mindset of saying, we want to stay within the simulation. We want to endure certain traumas or life challenges for the benefit of evolving our souls and spiritually growing and whatnot. So anyways, that's how we're going to go through this NDE. And I think there's a lot of insights to be gleaned, a lot of insights to be gathered in terms of perhaps some of the techniques and tactics that are used towards us, I think, in these NDEs or in pre-birth planning, so on and so forth. I also want to go through and challenge some of these ideas that they're talking about that I used to be behind, right? 100% in terms of, hey, we're here to endure certain challenges so we can spiritually evolve and grow, and it's all part of a plan, and we're all living our purpose. I want to challenge some of these notions as we go through, because I think it doesn't connect. It doesn't make sense when you think about the fact that our lives are purportedly planned from birth, or sorry, before birth. And then we have these things that we do that are essentially part of this plan. Yet when we go to our life reviews later, we're then made to feel guilty about these things, or made to feel bad about how we hurt this person, that person. Wasn't that in the pre-life plan? Or did we deviate? I don't think so. I feel like these plans, for the most part, are set or programmed into us, but then we do what we're planned to do, and then we get bombarded with these feelings of guilt afterwards. Like, it's not really lining up, in my opinion. Now, if you have an explanation, or you have something that you want to share in the comments, please do, as to why you disagree, and give me your explanation. Again, I can't say that I'm 100% right here, but just trying to use my logical lens. Things are not really connecting. The last thing I'll say before we get into the mixture with all of these great excerpts is that what I've said before, I think we have to go back to, which is this idea that, all right, are the entities with our limited faculties on this planet, are the entities in the astral that have set up this whole system, are they likely way more intelligent than us? Probably. Are they capable of a much higher degree of processing than we are? I think so. So you might say, well, how is it ever possible for us to unravel this entire mystery and understand what's really going on and break free if we are at such a disadvantage intellectually? Well, I'm going to go back to what I've said before, which is, the truth is the key. Whether you're talking about a comparison of animals to humans, or humans to some sort of super advanced ET race, or whatever it may be, or some higher intelligence, I think that ultimately all of us can decipher, with good discernment, all of us can decipher between truth and a lie. And lies will never completely connect. There's always going to be discrepancies. There's always going to be things that don't tie up nicely. And that's our superpower. If we're trying to get to the truth and we're truly seeking the truth, we're going to have that advantage, because nobody is going to ever be able to perfectly tie up and put a bow on a lie and make it seem perfect. There's always going to be holes. There's always going to be gaps. So that's the positive message that I want you guys to remember, is that we have truth on our side. We're trying to find the truth. We're trying to figure out what's really going on. And ultimately, you can't hide that, I don't think, at least not forever. For a certain time, you can fool some people some of the time. You can't fool everybody all the time. That's what I think is going to be the thing that ultimately saves us in the grand scope of infinity, as we are infinite beings. So without further ado, let's get into this account. Once again, this is Betty Guadagno. I looked up her pronunciation of her last name, so I hope I'm saying it right. This is Betty Guadagno. This is not an indictment on her by any means. I just want to reiterate that. This is just, I thought this was a great NDE to discuss, a great jumping off point to try to get to the bottom of what's really happening in NDEs or pre-life planning or whatnot. What is some of the manipulations that are taking place? This gives a lot of really great examples. And shout out to Isabella Green, by the way, who sent me this NDE a while ago, finally getting around to reviewing it. So Isabella Green, you're a legend. Thank you. Betty Guadagno is a near-death experiencer, spiritual speaker, recovery coach, and founder of The Wheel. After years marked by trauma, addiction, sex work, and loss of both her parents, one of her father, by the way, died by suicide, is what she says. Her life changed dramatically following a drug overdose and profound spiritual experience in March of 2019. Betty describes being shown, excuse me, her pre-birth planning, the interconnected nature of reality, and a deeper purpose behind her life's challenges. Since then, she has devoted her work to recovery, personal transformation, and helping others explore consciousness, healing, and spiritual awakening. So obviously, all very noble things that she's going towards. This NDE seems to have had a profound positive impact on her life. I'm not trying to take any of that away from her. I think these are all fantastic things. But let's get into the heart of the story and let's see if we can extract some nice pieces, nice nuggets of information in terms of what might really be happening. So first of all, here she's going to talk about her near-death experience and the life review that she has, which is included in thousands and thousands of NDE accounts. If you've studied NDEs to any extent, you know life reviews are an inherent part of that NDE structure. So here we go. Here is her life review in her own words.
So when I had my near-death experience, the first part of my experience was a life review. And it was pretty intense because, again, like I caused a lot of harm. I was a traumatized person who maliciously went around traumatizing other people. I was a drug addict for 20 years. 10 of those years I spent in prostitution and in and out of homelessness. So I had manipulated and caused a lot of harm to a lot of people. And
let's pause it right here. So we talk about the pre-life planning. We talk about having everything engineered to some extent of what your major stopping points or big moments in your life will be. So she's setting this all up. She's talking about all these negative things, the way she hurt people, manipulated people. And then that's the question that I have. Not that I disagree that lives are planned ahead of time. I actually agree with that. Planned or programmed, that's another question for another day. I agree with that because we've heard so many people discuss this. It's talked about in Journey of Souls. I'm not saying that I dispute this idea. What I'm saying is it doesn't gel with the idea that then you should be made to feel guilty for a lot of the things that you do in your life. If it's part of the planning process, then what's happening? Then you're doing exactly what you planned to do. And then now you're made to feel guilty and bad about all of it. Like something, and then that is used to get you to have another incarnation. You still got to work on this because you did that, but you planned this, right? It just doesn't really add up when you think about it. Maybe it does in some higher level that I haven't considered yet, but that's my gut right now. Anyways, back to the story. So she's going to talk about all these negative things that she's going to have to relive and experience through this life review.
My life review, that was all flooding back at me, not in like a scary way where I have to be super scared at every move that I make throughout my life, but just in a way that made me recognize that, wow, I did a lot of damage. And I honestly didn't even know that I was doing damage to other people. I knew that I was like kind of ruthless. I knew that I was pretty dominant, but I didn't realize the way that I was making people feel. And in my life review, that all came flooding into me, not as judgment, not as condemnation, just as truth. This is literally how I made other people.
Okay, so there it is. Again, it's coming back. And I get it. She's saying there was no judgment, but when you're seeing that truth, most people say that in these life reviews, she didn't say this explicitly, but you feel the emotions of that you basically elicited from other people. I mean, you could say it's not judgment, but it's obviously presented and put forth to make you feel a certain way, in my opinion. At least that's my understanding or interpretation. Okay, now we get to this next part, and I think this is a clear indication of two things. Okay, number one, the use and deployment of projections of either religious figures or loved ones to manipulate, to get you to buy into coming into a light, buying into this whole process. And the second thing is the love bombing that we've talked about. So many people say they feel this bliss when they first come out, this like a feeling they'd never felt before. She describes it very specifically, likening it to, well, you'll see in a second, likening it to multiple orgasms. The question is why, right? Why, right when you come out, do you feel this bliss? You know, one thing could be, well, it's just a release, and this is the feeling of heaven. And that could be one interpretation. But then again, it's followed up by discussions, and then it's followed up by sending you back. And there's a very important thing that comes out. I can't remember if it's this clip or the next one, but I think it gets you to buy into whatever is then given to you information wise. Because she says that specifically. She's like, all right, I'm in. Whatever you want to tell me, I'm game. I know this is the truth. So I think this projection of these intense feelings of love, along with the projection of her father, are there by design, are there to get you to buy in, aka to manipulate you. But check this out for yourself.
While I was in my life review, I started to hear my father, who had been dead by suicide for 11 years at that point in time. I started to hear him chanting out to me, and he was saying, "You are worthy of all the love in the universe. You are worthy of all the love in the universe." And he just kept saying it over and over and over again. And I didn't believe those words, but I trusted his voice. And so I started to follow him into the light of the experience. And it kind of felt like in Star Trek when they like beam you up, it just felt like I kind of like noticed that there was a light, and then all of a sudden I was dissipated into the light. And that feeling was way different than my life review. It was like, a lot of near-death experiencers say that they don't have human words to convey what it's like, but it felt like a trillion orgasms on top of every one of the trillions of cells inside of your body. It was like the most ecstatic, blissed out feeling that you could ever imagine. It was a sense of reunion came through, joy, and then there was peace and serenity. And it just truly felt like home. Not home like where all your stuff is, but like an eternal, etheric home that is imprinted inside of me. And I just never had access to it before.
Again, there is a chance that literally she's feeling that because that is the case. But the obviously the other possibility is you're flooded with these emotions. You're bombed with these emotions in some way, kind of like a drug, right? If you give somebody a drug, you make them feel a certain way, and then you just have them feel this warm embrace. If you're familiar with how people, when they describe heroin or some of these harsh drugs, they say it's like you're wrapped in this blanket. Obviously, I don't know from personal experience, but they describe being wrapped in this blanket of ultimate comfort. I mean, it literally sounds like almost a delivery of some sort of a narcotic, but in a spiritual sense, to make you feel this incredible feeling, and then gets you, therefore, to be very pliable at that point, easy to manipulate. And on top of that, we have her father there, and she said very explicitly, I trusted the voice, right? And then where is she going? She's going into that light, which we've talked about so many times as being something that you need to be wary of. I want to talk about her father in a second, but the other thing is, just think about for a second, what are these NDEs? We talk about a pre-birth planning. If you're planning all this stuff, are they baked into the plan? At this point, you're going to have an NDE, and then we're going to give you this information and reset you. I mean, it could be, but you know what it sounds like to me the more that I think about it? And you guys tell me if you agree or disagree. It sounds like some sort of a safety mechanism in the system, that there's an attempt to plan our lives and to have you go down a certain route. And sometimes we deviate a little bit because of free will, right? We have an opportunity to do that. And then sometimes we slip out of our bodies earlier than we're supposed to slip out. And this is a system set up to get these souls and to convince them to come back and keep fulfilling a life purpose. Or it could be that the system is starting to fall apart. People are now starting to wake up. And so now they're using this tactic to take these people out that have been given a certain programming in the pre-birth planning phase. And now they're given new programming as a mechanism by which to now, hey, maybe we've used these certain religions in the past to keep people in line. Well, now we need this new awakening, this new age dogma of, hey, you're living your purpose. Everything is golden. You're here to learn lessons. Life is a school, blah, blah, blah. Let's go bring these people in, give them this message, send them back, and have them now push out this message to keep people pacified once again in the system. I mean, I don't know. These are just theories. This is just my logical brain at work. You tell me if that makes sense or not. But that's what I'm starting to think now, that these NDEs could fall in one of those two categories. Okay, now I want to go back to her seeing her father. She mentioned in her own words, her father passed away via suicide 11 years ago. Now, this is not definitive proof that this is a projection of her father, not really her father, but this is food for thought. So the book Children Who Remember Previous Lives, this is something that Jason Giorgiani has talked about. I've kind of quoted him quoting the book, but finally I wanted to get some actual excerpts from the book, or a online summary of the book of this particular point. So 11 years ago, it's possible that he could still be in the astral and he could still be up there, and this is who she's hearing. But let me read this real quick and you guys decide for yourself, because this lends to the a greater likelihood that this was a projection and he's actually already been assimilated back into the system in another life or in another body. So in this book, the key finding is that there's no single fixed amount of time people are believed to remain in discarnate or astral state. But based on 616 investigated cases, the median interval is 15 months. Again, that's median. Okay. If you remember mathematics, median just means the middle value. It doesn't mean the average. It doesn't mean the mode, which is the most common. It's just right smack in the middle. So you could still have anywhere from maybe like 1 day or something, could be nothing theoretically, all the way up to 50 years, 100 years, right? But then let's dip a little bit more into the data. So the full range was extremely broad, a few hours, as they mentioned, to 20 years. 11 years is within zero, basically a few hours to 20. It is possible. But he says in most cultures, the interval is not believed. Oh, it's not believed to have a universally fixed duration. Hold on, down here. It's 15 months is the median. And he's done shorter and long and had longer intervals. Hold on, where's this part that I want to say? Okay, yeah, here we go. Elsewhere in the book, he says that the interval in the reported cases was usually very short and rarely more than 5 years. So this is the key, although exceptional cases extend much longer. So we get that median value, and then he says almost like an interquartile range, if you remember that from mathematics, like the 25th to the 75th percentile, but probably broader because it says very exceptional cases are beyond 5 years. But the bulk of the cases, it sounds like the upper end is 5 years. So this is more than double that upper range. Again, this is not definitive that this was a projection, because he does say it could go up to 20 years. But it seems the evidence would seem to indicate that it's more likely than not that this was a projection, that he had already reincarnated into another body, and that wasn't really him. I'm just saying and I'm not trying to, like, if Betty hears this, I'm not trying to upset her or say, this is what she experienced and this is what she believes to be the case. And how could you not? Like, your parent passed away, you're hearing their voice, you're in the astral, you're getting love bombed, you're feeling all these emotions. You're probably very likely to believe it, hence why the system works the way that it does. But I wanted to point this out because I think this is a very interesting fact to consider. Okay, now we're going to talk about how all these feelings, or we're going to hear her clip saying how all these feelings made her just immediately accept everything that she's hearing as truth, right? Maybe it was true, but then the alternative is, yeah, everything happened that way intentionally to make you feel like, hey, I'm just, whatever you tell me, I'm buying, because of oh my God, I never felt like this before. It must be legitimate. Check this out.
Saying that we are the bravest, most special volunteers, that we've all signed up to come to Earth for the Great Awakening. Again, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what the Great Awakening is. I just know that I'm a part of it. Like, whatever this light is telling me, I'm automatically accepting it as truth. You know, on Earth, we like question everything. Somebody's like, the sky is blue. And we're like, well, is it blue or is it more of a turquoise? And like, we're always questioning everything. But in this space, no, total acceptance of everything that's happening. And so I'm told that I'm a spiritual soldier and I'm part of this cool spiritual army. I'm like, okay, great. And then my awareness shifts over to another scene after I accept that information. And when I go over to this other scene, I'm in front of a table of beings. And it was just like a crappy plastic, like, card table. It was like nothing ornate, nothing beautiful, nothing that you would expect to see in heaven. But there was these 4 light beings behind the table. And they had this beautiful ornate book on top of the table. It was like maroon and gold and velvet and ancient. And they were flipping through the book. And they are like looking at the book and looking at me and looking at the book and looking at me. And they say, okay, you're just here for information. It's good to see you.
Okay. So again, all these experiences, getting that buy-in to her. Another thing is, this is something that David Icke has talked about. Why a book? Why do you need a book? Obviously, everything is communicated telepathically. Probably all this information is there. It's the same reason I think that they have a book as to why a lot of times these figures look to have like long white beards. It's giving you a point of reference from Earth of authority, an authority figure, right? You have like a big official looking book like we might have on here on this planet to store information, and that conveys this idea of authority, or the long white beards. You're the ancients of this realm, even though aging doesn't exist in the astral, but it's again for that projection, for conveying that message that, hey, these are the people that you should be listening to. And again, she's buying fully into this whole idea, accepting everything that is coming back to her as truth. Now we're going to talk about what is this whole great awakening that she talked about. She's like, hey, you're here for the great awakening. By the way, that sounds like a collective great awakening. So that's now the purpose. That's what she came here for, because in most NDEs, and even in hers, it's like you're here for an individual purpose. So what is the you know what I mean? What is the point or purpose of being here now? You're saying it's some collective thing. This is an amazing thing, great awakening. Hey, it might be amazing, but isn't the original purpose to work on your specific quote unquote deficiencies and for you to level up? So why is that? It just sounds like another thing lumped in there as another point to convince her to come back, but that doesn't really have any legs. Anyways, let's get into this great awakening specifically.
And again, it was like for the great awakening. So I was here to transmute collective trauma. I'm like, what are some of our collective's traumas? Well, a lot of people are dealing with poverty. They have a hard time overcoming that. With addiction, have a hard time overcoming that. Sexual trauma, I grabbed the variety pack of that one. And I was like, I'll take that 12 pack right there. Thank you so much. People have a very hard time digesting and recalibrating after trauma like that. And so I know that I'm taking all of this on, but as I'm taking on all of these really dense experiences, the other side of the experience is coming with it, the dual of the experience, right? Because we live on Earth and it's duality. So I didn't just pick addiction. I also picked recovery, and I didn't just pick poverty. I also picked wealth and abundance. But none of those things had happened in my life yet. So all I'm seeing is like trauma, tragedy, dereliction, degradation, homelessness, prostitution. I'm like, yep, those boxes clock. I guess somebody will just put these other ones back when I go to check out, because like those aren't part of my life. And the one part of the story that I really like to talk about is that when I picked the box of childhood sexual trauma, a little orb of light came out with the box, and that orb of light was the soul of the man who molested me when I was a little kid. And we came orb to orb with each other, and we came into a contract. And I felt this all happening in this moment. And as the contract was sealed between the two of us, I just felt this unconditional love that we had for one another, that we were going to play these roles. And my human mind cannot comprehend how could being such a terrible villain in someone's life equal unconditional love. And I don't have some great, carefully constructed spiritual sentence to help people understand. I just know, like I have this deep, innate knowing inside of me that I did choose that experience. And it was for the evolvement of myself, whatever that means.
I don't doubt, again, we have these pre-birth planning stages. I'm not saying I doubt that she potentially chose that to some extent, because we've seen other books and other people saying that these lives are a choice. And it also goes back to the idea of free will. I think that free will is an important law that can't be bypassed. So is it, as crazy as that sounds, is it possible that she agreed to it? I'm not saying that's not possible. But what I challenge is the second part, that she chose it specifically for the evolution of her soul. This is the part that now I'm calling BS on. Again, not calling BS on her, but this is what she thinks and this is what she's relaying. But again, why did she choose that? I think it was pushed upon her to choose that. It was impressed upon her that she needed to do that in order to quote unquote evolve. But the question is, evolve from what? We hear this all the time. Hey, now you need to work on this. You need to choose a life of poverty. You need to choose this. And then she's talking about transmuting these difficult situations for her spiritual evolution. Here's my question that I think nobody's really asked. What are all of our souls like in the astral before they go through these tragedies. I mean, we're talking about, we're always looking at past lives, and you did this wrong and that wrong and the other thing wrong. And by the way, when everything is rigged against us, we're these difficult, terrible situations. We have to kill and hunt on a daily basis, destroy plants, animals, whatever. We have to consume to stay alive. Plus, we have all these difficult dynamics. The system is rigged against us. And then so we're looking at these past lives and then saying, hey, you did X, Y, and Z wrong. So to work on that, you need to have this life of this new challenge. And then now new things happen that you do wrong. Okay. But the question is, where are we trying to get to in the astral, in our true selves, right? It's like, if we have all of these deficiencies, I want to know, what are the souls like in the astral? Are they running around doing terrible things to each other? I never hear that. Are they bouncing around wreaking havoc? Hey, you're still too unruly, we need to send you back into a life. It's like, no, that doesn't seem to ever be brought up. It's what are you doing while you're in the game of life, while you're within the simulation? These are the things you're doing. But that shouldn't be what you're looking at in order to determine where you need to grow. It's like, where are you in reality, in your spirit body, outside of the meat suit? What are you doing that is causing concern up there? And I think that's the fundamental flaw with all these explanations. You can always point to past lives. I've said this before, and that's, I think, part of the way the system was engineered. You can always look and find moments at any point where you hurt somebody, you did something, whether by doing something explicitly or not doing something, that you're going to cause damage. Like, that's just the way this world is set up. You could be more active and probably step in and maybe thwart a crime or different things like that. And you not doing that, you could say, oh, well, now you've led to this harm or this injury. There can always be something within these lives, I think, that you could point to and say, you messed up or you caused harm. But if we're trying to elevate the soul purportedly, or make it better, then my question is, in the pure soul form, what's so wrong with everybody? I don't think this question has ever been asked or answered. And that, to me, is an indication that something is wrong here. It's just a system rigged to make us fail, in my opinion. Okay, now here's a really crazy part. She actually here refuses to go back to Earth. And you want to talk about manipulation? This, to me, is one of the clearest indications of manipulation here. In fact, it's basically, she's threatened. That's how I'm reading it anyways. If she chooses to try and stay back and not go back into her body. I don't know how else to interpret it, but you guys decide. This is pretty wild what she says happens.
I'm still not going to go back to Earth because that place is a fucking dumpster fire. But I will watch this Great Awakening show from up here. I'm just going to go grab my PJs and a bowl of popcorn. I'll curl up on the couch. What's your streaming service? Is it Earth TV or something? Whose password can I borrow? I was like very dead set on just staying in that space. And they just told me, like, listen, you're not going back as a punishment. They said, you're going back because you've been training for lifetimes, for this particular lifetime. And we're not going to let you miss your opportunity. This is the most exciting time to be on Earth. You're there for the transformation of consciousness. We're not going to let you miss it. And I was like, no, I'm okay with missing it. Like, I'm totally okay just from watching from above. Like, I have no desire to go back. And then I could see my body outside of myself, blasted out on my bathroom floor, naked from this drug overdose. And I said, I can't go back into her. Look at her. Like, she is a mess. That's embarrassing. And I won't go back. You can't shove all of my divine infiniteness back into that horror show of a person. Please don't do that. And they said, okay, well, if you don't go back into her, then we're going to show you the baby that you're going to be born into. And they showed me this little baby. It looked just like a video game. Everything in my experience looked a lot like a video game. Her little 3D avatar popped up. She was rotating slowly, 360 degrees. All of her stats popped up next to her. And she was going to have an even more challenging life than the life that I had already lived. And I was like, this is impossible. Like, there's no way that I can start from zero. That just seems, that's too much. So if these are really my only options, go back into the glitched, broken body that I just came from, or be reborn into a baby with an even more challenging life, then I'm going to choose the body I just came from. And as soon as I made the decision, my awareness started to sift back into my body. And as it did, the beings of light told me that my life was going to be amazing. It was going to be nothing like it had been before. that I was going to have soulmates and kindred spirits and connection and community and mentors and teachers. And I'd be living in spiritual awareness and I have access to them. And it was going to be so, so, so much better. And all I had to do was just trust them. And I was like, I don't even fucking know you, bro. I definitely don't trust you. I came back into my body after that. And I sat up on my bathroom floor. I shook my head. I thought, wow, I was so high that I thought I was talking to God. I was so high that I thought I planned my whole crazy effed up life. That is wild. And then I just went right back to living my life the way that I had always been living it. I went back to prostituting myself. I went back to using drugs every day. I went back to lying and manipulating and stealing from people and places and things. And I just really didn't think that it was a spiritual experience. It took me months to figure out that it was.
Okay, so eventually she figures it out, and then eventually basically her life does change and all these great things happen. And the things that happen were some of those things that she was promised. By the way, we're going to go in reverse order. I have a couple points that I want to hit here in relation to everything that she said. So first, talking about this idea that, and she said, oh, everything's going to be amazing. And then it turns out to be true. This is a really important point. Because, and she does say even there, oh, like, why should I trust you guys? I don't even know you guys. And she has some hesitancy. Well, it sounds like now she's fully embraced what they said and she fully trusts them. And I have to believe a big part of the reason why she feels that way is because they told her certain things were going to change and her life was going to become amazing. And those things happened. So what they predicted effectively came true. And also they were all positive things. So why wouldn't she want to believe that what they were saying is, of course, truthful? Because they predicted things and they happened. Oh my God, it must be truthful. And I want to throw in a counterpoint, just food for thought. Okay, and this is also, by the way, something when I interviewed Darius that he talked about too, why he bought in so much to what he was told from Celeste and the beings that he interacted with, is they predicted exactly how his life would be today, and it came to fruition. And that is amazing. And I don't doubt that he experienced that. And I don't doubt that she experienced this and everything has come to fruition. But I don't think having these predictive powers is what we should cling to and say, well, therefore, then what they're saying is the truth of the nature of reality. It could again be, which I think it is, a manipulation tactic. Think about it like this. You could have on this planet, in this life, you could have a company come to you and say, hey, listen, we know you that, like, let's say Coca-Cola comes to you. We know you think Coca-Cola is really dangerous and bad for people, but it's not. And it's actually great for you. And we know we have this deeper information that it's fantastic for the global population. It's a miracle drug. Just people don't realize it. And sugar's actually really good for you and all the stuff. I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't make sense. I not really what I heard. Well, I'm going to tell you something. In 2 weeks from now, you're going to wake up a millionaire. You're going to have $5 million in your bank account, and you're going to know that we are speaking the truth. And then 2 weeks later, you get $5 million in your bank account because maybe they deposit in there, and you can be like, oh my God, what they said is true. Maybe everything else they said is true. But that is not the basis by which you would make, right? Like they just said something they were able to affect and come to fruition. So they're able, right? If they're in charge of this system or have this influence in the system monetarily, they can make that thing come to fruition. And then now you're buying into something that's unrelated to that. You see what I'm saying? So this could be one of those similar circumstances. They can affect these changes. They can modify your life in just the way that they're saying it's going to be modified. And then now that's causing you to buy into things that have no relation to these certain predictive capabilities. So I am inclined to believe that that was showed to her and these things would happen. And then however it's made to happen, it's made to happen. And then of course, now that's making her conflate this predictive ability with the entire message being true. And I think that's what's effectively the foundation for her believing all this stuff. And I think it's a faulty foundation. That's my takeaway from all of that. Okay. Now, the other thing that I want to go back and say, we're going to go in reverse order. The next point that I want to make is she actually we'll do these kind of together. 2 points in one. She didn't want to go back. And they said, okay, well, if you don't go back, then you're going to be born into this baby. All right. I think that's a threat. You want to say that is, well, no, she didn't go through her full life lessons and she still has another life to live. Okay, you could say that, but what did she say in there in that clip? She said that the baby that she was going to be brought into was going to have an even more difficult life. That to me is a threat. Okay, you're not going to choose option A. Option B, which is your only other option, at least that's how they're positioning it to her, is way worse. So what do? You choose the lesser of the two evils. That to me sounds like a threat. That to me sounds like manipulation and forcing her back into this life. And she said as soon as she mentally agreed, she started going back. The other question is, why harder? I mean, maybe you could say there's some reason, because if she dips out early, okay, well, that's the punishment or whatever, that's the consequences. But to me, she had already endured a lot of trauma and difficulty in this life. If anything, she would go back into a slightly easier life. It's not like she just bowed out of the life completely or did something weird. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me that now she would have to go into a more difficult life, already having lived as long as she lived and dealing with all this trauma and difficulty. So that kind of falls flat on its face as a rational outcome of deciding, of not wanting to go back into that life, except for the explanation that it is an implicit or really an explicit threat and manipulation. Okay. Next, she goes into a little bit more detail here about what is the Great Awakening, because she's mentioned this multiple times in this recount of the NDE that she is here, she is picked, she's special, she's part of a spiritual army that is meant to be part of this Great Awakening. She does kind of mention that it's transmuting a lot of these negative things into positive things, some collective purpose, which again, I think conflicts with the idea that really these are meant to be individual purposes fulfilled. Anyways, here she goes into a little bit more detail about what is the Great Awakening.
Now, the Great Awakening is a shift in consciousness. Right now, we're in a third dimensional level of thinking that is a self-centered level of thinking. It's material-based. That's basically that. Self-centered thinking, we're transforming into a fifth dimensional thought system, which is a service or spirit-centered thought system. So some of us are like already teetering between these two things now. And like the fourth dimension is supposed to be time and space and awareness. So, depending on what mood I'm in the day, I can either be in a third dimensional thought system or I can be in a fifth dimensional thought system. Like right now, we're both doing an act of service for each other, for humanity, like we're making content. That feels like a fifth dimensional thought for me. But then I could look at in the other direction and say like, oh, well, I look really cute on camera. And like, I'm really glad that I wore this shirt. And that's like more of a third dimensional thought system, a little self-centered, right? It has nothing to do with other people or humanity as a whole. So I used to think that it was going to be like an actual physical shift happens, like all walls disappear, like all the architecture of Earth goes away, and like we're blasted out into a new Garden of Eden. And that was like a very affirming thought for me for a really long time. And my awareness has shifted because the way that I see it now is that whether you believe in the Great Awakening and New Earth or you believe in doomsday and the apocalypse, both of those things keep you out of the present moment. And the present moment is where heaven is. So I don't need to like wait to the weekend to start having a good week. I don't need to wait till summer to enjoy myself. I don't need to wait until retirement. I don't need to wait until I go to heaven. I don't need to wait until the Great Awakening happens. I can just choose right now in this present moment to experience an awakening. And so that's how my awareness on it has shifted.
I feel like I needed to hear that today. Like even today, I'm just thinking like, oh, like I'll be able to connect more with nature in the summer, like when the snow's gone. So that hit home.
Okay, I'm glad.
And then I'm wondering about how your perspective on life challenges has changed since going to the spiritual supermarket.
Yeah. Well, I won't say bring them on, but like, I know that I can handle any life challenge. I don't think that any soul signs up without the ability to take on a specific life challenge. So let's say that you're a person who has signed up for mental health stuff. Like, let's say that you pick a cereal box that says severe depression. Now you have the opportunity to overcome that depression. Now, if it happens in this lifetime or another lifetime, your soul doesn't really care, right? Like obviously your human does. Like your human's like, oh, we gotta like process this. We gotta get through this. I don't want to live this miserable existence. It feels miserable to live with depression. So the same thing with addiction, like whenever somebody picks a life lesson of addiction, they're also picking recovery. Do they experience it in one lifetime? Well, some people don't, like my parents. My parents struggled with addiction their whole lives, and they didn't get to complete the other side of that experience. They never experienced recovery inside of this lifetime. They died before they had an opportunity to discover that. But I know that they're like either fractured off in other timelines where they had an opportunity to experience recovery. They'll be reborn and they'll get another opportunity to do addiction and recovery all over again. There's like this infinite number of parallel realities happening simultaneously where all sorts of cool stuff is happening. But I do think that if anybody's dealing with a life challenge, just know that your soul didn't haphazardly pick whatever you're going through. Like all you have to do is just change your belief system around it and things will start to change.
Yeah. Do you ever get pushback when you share this kind of thing? Because I find that speakers who
Okay, hold on. So we gotta pause here for a second. I think that I had this clip go a little bit long here. Okay, but a couple different takeaways. So first of all, let's rewind back to what is the Great Awakening. She's saying it's the shift from being self-centered, now moving to this idea of no service to others. I used to think this made sense, but now thinking about the framework of the world, the food chain, the way that this entire simulation is set up, how can that be plausible? Like, actually, what made more sense was the first thing that she said, oh, I'm waiting for this physical shift, the walls to come down, and we're going to like a new realm, a Garden of Eden. Not that I necessarily think that's the case, right? I think that is not what is going to happen, but that at least makes more sense to me, because how can we go to this service to others and all this type of idea of this fifth dimensional awakening and awareness and existence when this system is set up in such a flawed and problematic way where we are forced into consumption and destruction on a daily basis? So that all that stuff doesn't really make sense to me. Now, going back to the life challenges as well, see, something is not adding up. She's saying, okay, well, we're choosing addiction, and then along with that comes recovery. But then we may not experience that in this life, and then we get to go ahead and do it all again. Like, how is all of this meshing with the pre-birth planning and the fixed blueprint? And a lot of NDEs basically just coming back and saying, hey, you're on the right track. Maybe not everybody's on the right track. Maybe some people are, some people aren't. But we've got this on one hand, this idea that everything we're doing, we're right on. Everything is planned out. We're here to experience, to learn, to grow. And then on the other hand, we're talking about these certain objectives that you have to hit and meet. And we chose these particular traumas. And then sometimes we lift out of it and sometimes we don't. And then if we don't, we have to come back in. Like, how much is actually set up in these pre-birth plans? Because then now that piece starts to fall apart a little bit, where you're planning out the entire life, but then, oh, these major things are supposed to happen, then they just don't happen. Or is it instead we're made to think that we fell apart and we're made to think that we failed and we have to go back and remedy these issues, whereas actually we followed everything to a T, but then now these certain things are being used against us. I mean, that's kind of where I'm sitting right now, and that's what I'm thinking. Because again, I think the big question is not what do we have to work on in terms of remedying transgressions from our past lives. The bigger question should be, what do we have to work on to make us better spirit body, spirit entities or whatnot in the astral or elsewhere, right? What are our issues in those realms? That's what should be what we're working on, because that's true existence, not in this simulation where things are all pitted against us and we're forced to be destructive on a daily basis, at least in my opinion. If you go back to one of the pre-birth memories that I discussed in another video, the pre-birth memory says that outside of this realm, they didn't see any negativity. They didn't see any anger, hatred, all these terrible things. That is all within this construct solely. So I think that's something else that we should consider as well. Okay, so this is the signing up for life challenges. See that last clip actually accidentally included the life challenges, so we're going to skip this one. Then we're going to go to the final section here. This is the final clip where she's talking about the pre-birth planning in particular. Let's listen to what she says, and then we will react as we close out the video.
Yeah. Do you ever get pushback when you share this kind of thing? Because I find that speakers who have in the past. Like, people get angry about it in the comments.
Okay. Yeah. No, yeah. I would get really angry too if it wasn't like my own experience. If someone looked at my life and they're like, oh, your parents killed themselves and you were a prostitute for 10 years and a drug addict. Well, you picked it. Get over it. I'd be like, yo, let's fight. Like, let's go. I'm down. So this information isn't for everybody. You know, like I would never, ever push. I mean, for me, it's a knowing, right? But I would never push this belief or this knowing on anybody. It's not for everybody. This is for people who are like very lost in a deep challenge and they're looking for spiritual meaning behind it, right? So for me, I could have just drowned in an ocean of grief for the rest of my life. I could have medicated and sedated myself through this harrowing loss of my parents. I could have never looked it head on, and I just could have like kept being in the challenge, in the mess, right? And even if it wasn't for this profound spiritual experience, if I just came upon this information about pre-birth planning, I would snatch it the fuck up. It's a good piece of information. It's a nice belief to integrate because it takes all this pressure off of everything. If my life is predetermined, why am I freaking out about like, where's my soulmate? When is he coming? Like we already picked each other. I don't have to do anything. I just need to like relax and be set up for when it happens. I don't have to worry about my purpose. I don't have to worry about money. I don't have to worry about connection or community or anything. All of it's already been picked. So for me, it's a belief system that serves me, but it doesn't serve everybody. I would never go up to like a grieving mother who's just lost a child and be like, you planned it, get over it. I would never, that's terrible. And the idea around pre-birth planning can be very easily weaponized by people who are like, think that they're spiritually superior. Again, this info isn't for everybody. If it doesn't resonate, just leave it behind. I mean, you don't have to, who am I? I'm like some old crackhead prostitute. Don't listen to me.
I got a lot of things to say on this last clip. First of all, it's belief. I don't even like that word. We're just trying to understand the nature of reality. You don't adopt it because it serves you or dismiss it because it doesn't. We get a lot of times in this community, we get criticized for being negative or for being fear mongering. And I thought Isabella Green made a great point about this. This is not what this is not what we're trying to do. If the truth sucks and is scary, I mean, it's just that's an unfortunate thing, but that doesn't mean that we're trying to bring about fear in people. We're just trying to understand the nature of reality. So it's not like, hey, if this idea of reality serves you and it makes you happier, improves your life, take it. Otherwise, leave it. Like, that's not truth. And that's not the way that we should be trying to approach this information or this quest for information. And then also, we come to this idea of, you see the conflict that I was just discussing with the pre-birth planning. Number one, when you buy into this notion, it does create this passivity in people where you say, well, everything is planned out. Everything is happening as it's supposed to be happening. We're all good. I don't have to worry about my soulmate. Like she said, I don't have to worry about this, that, or the other. I just go along for the ride because the ride was pre-planned. But then on the other side, she says, well, hey, you chose addiction and recovery in this life. Maybe you don't get to experience the recovery here. Then you got to go back and do it again. Wait a minute. So that you're saying actually there's a consequence to not doing X, Y, and Z. You just did X and Y. Now you have to come back and do it again. That sounds like a consequence. That sounds like a potential deviation from the pre-birth planning. Like, stuff is not adding up. This is the point that I made at the beginning. Regardless of how intelligently well designed the system is, if it's designed with deception in mind, if it's designed to confuse people and not be truly forthcoming and not be truly honest, there's going to be cracks in the narrative. There's going to be cracks in the story. And I think that's what we're seeing here. So anyways, big takeaways from this video, from this NDE. Want to reiterate one more time as well. This is not meant to come down on Betty by any means. She's sharing her truth. And in fact, there's a lot of great information that we can glean from this. So I'm very happy that she shared this. I'm very happy Isabella sent this to me because I think there's a lot of insights that we can gather and glean from this entire account. And this is a lot of great food for thought for all of us that are trying to get closer and closer to the truth of what is really going on. So that's all I got for you guys. And again, another big thing too, I think this shows the biggest point is we have to be really careful, unfortunately, of things that are communicated to us from various entities, because sometimes it can be, maybe I'm sure there's cases where it can be legitimate, But just because they're telling us something and then something comes to fruition later, it doesn't mean that, hey, all this information is correct. Don't conflate those two. And I think we have to be really, really careful with that way of thinking. Anyways, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of her retelling of this story? What did you think of my narrative and my commentary? Let me know your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.